Hi guys, Matt Easton here. So I'm talking about the BBC's series of The Musketeers, currently showing on the BBC. It's in season 2 now, and there's been lots of talk about this series, both in terms of the sword fighting, some of the history, all sorts of aspects of it. But one of the subjects that certainly amongst people I know comes up an awful lot is the costumes. Okay, and here we've got another classic example, much like the series Vikings, which I've addressed in a previous video. We've got another example here of leather biker gear, essentially. Okay, so we've got leather, it's all leather here. That's leather, that's leather. This is all leather. His trousers are leather. This is all black leather. And his trousers, I think, are not leather, amazingly. It's leather and more leather. What's going on, guys? Like, the 17th century was not full of loads of kind of chromed, shiny leather like this. Like, what's going on? Perhaps more than that, the bigger issue I've got is the colours. Okay, so the way that a historical period looks, a lot of it's dictated by the colours that you use. The 17th century was quite flamboyant. They had quite advanced cloth dyeing technologies, and there was lots of bright colours around. Unless you were going to a funeral or you were some kind of monk, you didn't wear black the whole time. It was just it would have been a bit weird. It would have looked like you were in mourning. And yet these guys are kind of in dark shades of brown or grey the whole time. We've got black, we've got kind of reddish brown in this case, but quite dark. And we've got dark brown in this case, and it's the same for loads of characters throughout the series. The cut of the actual clothes is not too bad. It kind of has got a 17th century look about it, but again, coming back to the colours, something I've noticed, something that really bugs me, I can't exactly explain why, are the shirts. So this guy is unusual in that he's got a relatively white shirt. Now, for anybody who has white shirts, be they linen or cotton or whatever, you know that it's not that difficult to keep them kind of approximately cream or light grey coloured. Okay, if you mix them with other things in the wash, they might go slightly off white, but they generally speaking stay a shade of white or cream. Okay, and yet these guys, whenever they take their tops off, the shirts that they've got underneath always look a kind of basically the colour of someone's roof or dirty street. Like, these are supposed to be guys who are quite, relatively high status. They're in the King's Guard. Why can't they wash their shirts? Or why can't they change their shirts? And that brings me on to another aspect of this topic, and that is, these guys wear the same clothes all the time. It doesn't matter whether they're fighting the Spanish out in some war, or whether they're riding along in the woods, or whether they're meeting the king, or whether they're meeting up with their girlfriends. The whole time they're wearing the same clothes. Now, I understand that in certain parts of society you may only have one doublet. However, your shirt would change, or maybe the accessories would change, your trousers would hopefully change occasionally. But these guys just wear the same stuff the whole time. When do they wash it? They must stink to high heaven, okay? So, like, they could at least have per character, like, 2 or 3 changes of clothes, or even, a smart set of clothes for when they go to meet the king, and a set of clothes when they're riding around in the field. It's a bit stupid that they're in the same stuff pretty much all the time. Basically, the only exception to that is when they're either in disguise or when they take their clothes off because they're with a woman. Lastly, the last thing I want to address, so the main things really are the fact that they never change their clothes, the colours, why is everything in like grey, brown or black the whole time, or an occasionally dark blue. But the other main thing to mention is the shoulder guards, and I've actually been asked by commenters on my videos to address these things. What are they? Well, they're kind of very clearly meant to look reminiscent of earlier sort of late medieval or early Renaissance armour, but they're made out of leather. Now, first off, do they have a historical precedent? Well, I have to be honest and say I don't know. I've never seen anything like these in leather on people's shoulders in a 17th century setting in any history books or in any historical art or anything else. So I suspect they're just completely made up and fabricated. Do they provide any practical purpose? Well, in actual fact, if you're rapier fencing, you're certainly if you're using a single sword, a little bit different if you've got sword and dagger, or perhaps sword and buckler, or sword and cloak. But if you're fencing with your right arm predominantly forward, in actual fact, a leather thing protecting your shoulder is not a bad idea. I mean, it's not going to provide an enormous amount of thrust protection from a rapier, from a stiff, sharp rapier blade, but it will offer something, and it might increase the chances of the point glancing up off the shoulder rather than going through it. And in actual fact, targeting the opponent's sword arm and sword shoulder was a thing that they did with rapiers in the 17th century. So actually, it does make a certain amount of sense in logic. However, it doesn't seem to have any historical basis whatsoever. Also, Porthos has this weird kind of like leather scale, riveted scale armour thing around his neck. Again, I don't know of any historical example. In fact, they're more likely in this period to be wearing something more like a frilly kind of collar, like a late version of a ruff. But in terms of practicality, I suppose it would offer some protection to his neck and throat, which might have some applications in a civilian rapier sort of dueling or brawling situation. So I don't have a huge problem with it on a logic basis, but I do have a problem in that it makes them look quite un-17th century. They don't have the look of, it kind of makes their clothes, which otherwise they're not very historically accurate at all, but it kind of makes their overall silhouette look even less 17th century than it already would have done. So I don't really like these things. I think they should ditch those. I think they look stupid. So there we go, but my main beefs with the clothes in this series are too much leather. Like, seriously, why so much leather, even leather trousers? And the colours. Come on, guys. You know, we've got to the 17th century, the age of reason and the Enlightenment and science, and why have they gone to wearing these colours that kind of make them look Dark Age, okay, which even in the Dark Ages they wore bright colours, bright reds and greens and blues and yellows and stuff. But by the 17th century, we should certainly be seeing a lot more white and light colours, yellows and oranges and reds and all of this kind of stuff. Okay, so it just doesn't look right to me. However, I will finish on a high note, or on a positive note rather, and say that the series is okay. I don't love it, but I kind of watch it from time to time, and yeah, it's an okay series. And I have to say the swords and the weapons are quite well done in it. I would say that their firearms are far more accurate in general than real 17th century firearms. They tend to, like, there's one bit where someone shoots someone on a castle wall with a pistol from about 200 yards away, which even with a crossbow that would be a very, very good achievement, but with a pistol, no way, man. So anyway, the clothes are my main issue, and the swords and the weapons and stuff like that are pretty good, and the stories are okay. Cheers, guys!